I believe we all have the potential to be remarkably creative. It's just we've got to open our eyes and pay attention and start thinking in different ways. We can figure out the stuff that matters most if we have the right mindset, that we don't have to know everything, that we should just get started.
That's Gregerman. He's an internationally renowned authority on business strategy, innovation, and hidden potential who has been called one of the most original thinkers in business today and the Robin Williams of business consulting. His new book, The Wisdom of Ignorance, Why Not Knowing Can Be the Key to Innovation in an Uncertain World, shares how not knowing can become one of the biggest drivers of innovation. So you'll learn 1, how to challenge assumptions that are keeping you stuck. 2, why not knowing can often lead to better solutions. And 6 ways to unlock ignorance as a superpower. And if you want a summary, write up the actionable wisdom that Alan shares, I recommend you sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter, which you can find at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Alan. Alan, welcome.
Greetings. Delighted to be here.
Well, I am a plenty ignorant person, so I'm excited to hear about how that could actually be a force for wisdom. Could you kick us off with a particularly surprising and fascinating discovery you've made as you were putting together your book, The Wisdom of Ignorance?
Sure. So I'm really keen on the idea that all of us have the ability to innovate consistently, but we're going to do it by paying attention and taking a fresh look at the things that matter most. And so the world around me is such a fertile ground for innovation. So let's start with a simple story I love to tell. And that's 1941, a guy named George de Mestral walking through the Alps with his dog. So George is walking with his dog and he notices his dog is covered with burrs. All of us have had that experience and we've said, what a nuisance. George thought burrs were cool. So he took some of these burrs off of his dog and he took them back and looked at them under an old microscope. Probably a lot of listeners have an old microscope somewhere. And he noticed that these burrs were amazing because they had an amazing ability to hook on to things as they brushed against them, like his dog. George discovered Velcro. Velcro wasn't discovered by geniuses with expertise in a lab. Velcro was discovered by a guy walking his dog. So my guess is all of us can walk around, pay attention, and imagine remarkable things that could be different. And that's really part of how we keep our careers energized and valuable.
Alan, I love that story so much. And that really reminds me of occasions in my own world in life where I notice something and then I dig in and then it becomes really potentially impactful. I remember one time I was at a podcast conference, Podcast Movement. It's amazing. And someone had a podcast app. They had a booth. Everyone's promoting their stuff, walking around the exhibit hall. And I remember I was struck because I saw this podcast app actually listed how many subscribers to a given podcast were on that app. And I said, holy smokes, you don't see that anywhere. Not on Apple Podcasts, not on Spotify. So I could conceivably deduce, based on your market share, a very rough estimate of the total listenership of a show based upon this number. And the person behind the booth is like, huh, yeah. I guess you could. like that hadn't occurred to them, but it was very fascinating. And hopefully you'll sort of deconstruct this alchemy because, I just noticed it and then it was like eureka and it was exciting. And then that was pretty helpful in terms of figuring out maybe some promotional opportunities, priorities, et cetera, and sort of market research and all kinds of little things. It's been a handy tool going forward. And now Listen Notes exist, so, people just go there. But before they did, I had this nifty tool at my disposal because I noticed a thing and was really curious about the potential implications. But I'm imagining, Alan, I'm leaving a lot of noticing on the table. Like there could be a lot of cool ideas just waiting to burst forth, but I'm oblivious to the implications of stuff, just like that Velcro burr example. Most of us would be like, oh, how annoying these burrs versus someone goes, oh, wow, how fascinating. Let's dig deeper.
Well, so think about most of us in most of our jobs don't take the time, and it's either because we're determined to do a good job, or our organizations don't ask us to take the time to actually step back and imagine, could we do more with whatever we're working on? And then imagine one other thing, which for me, and I've been in innovation consulting for a long time. People can't see me, but I have a few gray hairs. And so imagine what I talk about as the 99% rule. And that is 99% of all new ideas are based on something that already exists. And yet, in most organizations, they ask us to come to a meeting. They give us a blank sheet of paper or a beautiful whiteboard, and they say, does anybody have a brilliant idea? It's as though we can turn on the part of our brain that has brilliant ideas because we haven't been using it the rest of the time. The reality is just get out there, pay attention, and suddenly things start to click. Everyone listening, I'm sure, uses Uber. Was Uber created by folks who knew the taxi cab business? No, Uber was created by two friends who couldn't find a taxi on a trip to Paris and suddenly realized something called GPS technology existed, which had the ability to bring someone with a car to someone who needed a ride.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the origin of Uber. And so the world is filled with ideas, and they're all based on people actually stepping back, paying attention to things that exist, and imagining how they can adapt it to their world.
Well, now you got my wheels turning. I'm pondering here with regard to the 99% versus the 1%, just so I have a taste for what does a completely new idea even sound like?
No, that's a good question. So, of course, fire, that's like a completely new idea when it happened 2 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it happened because a lightning strike hit something and it set on fire, and then people suddenly decided we don't have to wait for lightning, we can do it or not. So that's an original idea. And then in 1895, the folks at Weber created a grill based on the idea that fire existed. Okay, so that's an important thing. The wheel, about a 6,000-year-old idea. Now the wheel is used in everything, and we couldn't get around on a scooter or a car or an Uber without the wheel. So those were original ideas. Optical lenses. So I wear glasses. I've worn them since kindergarten. Lucky guy. And when I was in kindergarten, glasses were pretty dorky. I'd like to think I have pretty cool glasses now. But the reality is, optical lenses to improve vision didn't happen until around 1285, and they've gone through lots of iterations. So now we can even get LASIK surgery or whatever we want to do. But that was an original idea, I think, when it happened, and it improved the ability of 60% of people who see badly to be able to see. So there are lots of original ideas, but most ideas actually are based on something else. Doesn't mean they're not original, but they didn't start by somebody taking a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah. Okay. And then by contrast, can you share with us some ideas that are just like, hey, I combine a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and here we go.
Well, think about it. I mean, so many things that are all around us. So Airbnb, people like to use Airbnb. It's an alternative to hotels, not started by people in the hotel business, started by some friends who were design students who needed to pay their rent. And one of them said, gee, should we let someone surf on our couch? And then suddenly they realized, well, couch surfing, everybody has a couch, an extra couch. Some people have an extra apartment. Some people have an extra house. Maybe those are places we can rent. But the idea of having somebody stay somewhere and pay you wasn't a new idea at all. So ideas kind of abound. The folks at Southwest Airlines, when they actually were really doing a good job, I shouldn't probably say they're not doing a good job, but they've changed their business model. They changed not by knowing a lot about the airline industry, but by knowing there had to be a better way to travel. And their model actually was Greyhound buses. The idea that people needed to get from point to point, and it shouldn't be particularly expensive. So look around at almost anything that really matters to you, and the reality is somebody has thought about how to make it better. And when we get into talking about how to make your career more valuable, I believe the folks who pay attention and figure out how to make things better are the ones that are going to be consistently valuable and relevant and really be desirable in the marketplace.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, well, so it's funny, Alan, as you do this, it seems like these ideas seem super easy in hindsight. Well, of course, we just do this. But when we're in the midst of things, sometimes coming up with these combinations, these creative breakthroughs feels real hard.
Well, it feels real hard for a few reasons. One is I don't want to downplay that it's not hard, but it's doable for all of us. And the reason why I think it's particularly hard for all of us is because we don't get up and wander around and pay attention. Think about when we were kids, we were innately curious, partially because we didn't know a lot of stuff. And so we were trying to figure things out. So we asked questions, looked, wondered what things were all about. We don't know a lot as adults. The percentage of what we know compared to what we could know or think about is really, really small. But we don't get up. And so either we're working in a business or organization, or we're working virtually, and we tend not to get up and wander around and pay attention. So the world passes us by. My view is if we simply get out there and engage the world, ideas are going to come to us. We see someplace using a technology. We see people on scooters. We see whatever is going on. And suddenly it dawns on us, why can't I do things differently? You gave the example of the podcasting conference, and suddenly when you saw an app, you thought of all the possibilities. Well, we should look at the apps on our phone and imagine what are the possibilities. Could we create an app that has that same functionality that does something a bit different? So I believe we just don't pay attention, and we don't wake up each day saying, maybe I should think differently about the world around me.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, you've got a fun turn of a phrase, enlightened ignorance. What is that? And how is that different than just not knowing what's up, being uninformed?
Okay, good. So we live in a world, let's be honest, where we're surrounded by stupidity, okay?
Okay.
And so I think of the difference between stupidity and enlightened ignorance as stupidity is really, I really don't know, but I actually don't care to know. And for me, enlightened ignorance is great. I don't know, but I'm challenged to figure out how to do something remarkable. And so that's what the book is really about, is the idea that we can find a problem that we don't know anything about, and we can figure it out if we have the right mindset. And so I want people to think about in organizations how we have the right mindset so each and every day we can show up and be really kind of engines of innovation. And so enlightened ignorance is really a formula for how we take something we don't know, we admit that we don't know the answer, and we actually figure out how to get smart enough to think about solving it. And so that for me is really the heart of innovation. That's what almost every innovator has ever kind of lived as, someone who's enlightened about something that needs to be done, but ignorant about how to do it and determined to figure out a better way.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I'm thinking about, I remember a moment of my ignorance back when I was consulting. I was a fresh Bain associate consultant, and we had a giant department store was our client, a chain of department stores. And I remember they had some apparel stuff going on, and I learned about the concept of size packs, which was totally new to me. I thought, so a department store doesn't just tell like the manufacturer of the clothing, I want, 10 larges and 20 extra larges, et cetera, like per their needs, but rather they are constrained to order a size pack, which has like 5 larges, 4 mediums, whatever, and then just hope they can mix and match like the size packs to get what they actually want. And I thought, that seems really silly to me not knowing about whatever supply chains and logistics and all the things. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be better for us if we could just buy the things that we wanted to hit our inventory needs for the customers at our retail stores instead of being constrained by these size packs? And I was genuinely curious. This is new to me. I'm learning. I'm asking, and then and so when I asked that question, basically like, what's up with size packs? I remember the partner on the case looked at me and was like, "Are you serious?" I was like, "Oops. I guess I wasn't supposed to ask that question." I've revealed that I am a total neophyte, ignoramus in the world of department stores and clothing distribution logistics. But to this day, and maybe I should just look it up, but I still think there's something to it in terms of you could disrupt the way that game is played. And there would be, I'm sure, pros and cons on playing the game the same versus differently. But I felt like in that moment, my ignorance could have potentially been an asset.
Well, I think ignorance is often an asset if there's a better way to do something. So now, based on what you said, let's use our imaginations. I can imagine now using AI and having cameras located in department stores and having those cameras look at all the people who come to shop for clothes, and those cameras, based on some parameters, making some decisions about the general sizes of the people who are coming into my store.
Oh, the customers will love it.
And then I order based on that. Okay. But now I just assume that people are evenly distributed, and people looking at certain types of clothes are evenly distributed. And that's why I get extra large and medium and small and extra small. And there are better ways to do things. I'm always thinking about the fact that and I'd love your listeners to think about, we're only limited by our imagination. So anytime you get in a situation where you get a little bit frustrated at work or somewhere else, just pause for a moment and say to yourself, there must be a better way. What's my initial thought about how there could be a better way? And that's really kind of part of the reason why I wrote the book, is I'd like to give people a guide to thinking about how there could be a better way to do the things that really matter.
Yeah. And it's interesting. And then I guess also to keep that humility, and I do want to hear about, that's one of your 6 keys. So let's talk about those in a second. But to also have the humility that is like, well, no, Pete, actually, size packs save us a huge amount on, transportation and warehousing and whatnot. And to get all customized without size packs, you're going to dramatically increase that cost. And it's actually not worth it for anybody. Like, okay, understood.
Okay, but I'm not certain that's the case, right?
Yeah, it may or may not be the case. There may be certain contexts where often, I guess, I'm biased towards the middle a lot, Alan. That's kind of my thing, is as I imagine there are probably certain contexts and circumstances in which size packs are perfect and others in which an alternative is superior.
Well, so I'm not an expert in retail clothing, but I do know, because I order a bunch of stuff online, that when I order online, I actually vote with my feet, right? So I know roughly the size I wear, and so I'm ordering. So if I run an online clothing business, then the reality is, and Nordstrom Rack or something else comes to mind, that people are giving me guidance. So I now know what to order because I can see what people are ordering. If I run a store, maybe I'm stuck a little bit with size packs, but I think in the future I won't need to be, if in fact there actually are retail stores. But what I want people to think about is the idea that there are ways to collect information, and that I can be most successful by starting fresh with a new challenge and saying, okay, what do I need to know to figure this one out? I'm not certain that retail stores are thinking about that, and that's why they offer the array of size packs or whatever they do. But I want people to actually just pause and say, okay, I can do anything here. Let me think in a new way.
Well, yeah, let's talk through your 6 keys to enlightened ignorance.
Okay. So here's the thing, and I appreciate the chance to talk about enlightened ignorance and the idea that actually we find something that matters to us and we actually want to be remarkable at it. And I think, as I think about your podcast, if I think about the things that are most important for people in their careers, it's that's the challenge we need to navigate. And the challenge is that we need to be committed to continuing to learn, grow, think of valuable ways to make a difference wherever we work, and then be open to suggesting those ideas. So where do we start? The first one, I think, is if I have a clear purpose, something that matters to me, I'm likely to make a difference. I'm likely to be focused on all the things I need to do because this is something I want to solve for. I want to create a solution to a problem. I want to create a new opportunity. So purpose is really powerful. And purpose can be, I want to create a product that enables women to feel good about the clothing they're wearing. Sarah Blakely creates Spanx. Okay. So Sarah Blakely, think about this. She was a door-to-door fax salesperson. Some of your listeners, because I know your demographic, are first going to go door-to-door sales. Would anyone open their door for somebody? And the second they'll say is, what in the world is like a fax machine? So this woman's selling fax machines door to door, and she suddenly realizes that her undergarments probably can be seen through some of her clothes. So she says, I'm going to solve this problem. She becomes for 2 years totally purpose focused on solving this challenge. And she does. And she creates this company called Spanx. And she's a billionaire now, all based on having no idea how to solve this problem, but then doing a series of tests and experiments to see if this problem is solvable. So that can be a purpose, certainly, but other purposes abound. If any of your listeners are ever in Washington, D.C., and they come to the National Portrait Gallery, they'll see a piece of art called The Throne. And The Throne is a remarkable piece of 184 objects that are all wrapped in aluminum foil, which was the work of a fellow named James Hampton, who was an untrained artist who worked in the federal government and for 14 years, evenings and weekends, built what he thought was a tribute to God. He was determined to be ready when God came back to earth and to show that he was among the most faithful. So he built this. This was his purpose, his life's work. And he was doggedly determined to do this. And this piece of art is amazing. In fact, you can Google it, just called The Throne of the Third Heaven. And if you look at this piece, you'll say to yourself, wow, what drove somebody to do it? A clear sense of purpose. So I just like people to think about, what am I doing and why does it matter? And why do I want to learn and excel at something? And if we have a clear purpose, that really matters.
I'm also just thinking very tactically, was it the reticular activation system? Like that notion that if you got a purpose and there's something you're trying to solve for, any number of random stimuli can become the impetus for like eureka inspirations, like that dog Velcro situation. I don't know his story if he was looking for fastening options or or anything, but if you were, you would get really fired up. You would notice that like, holy smokes, I got to know everything about burrs. Stat.
Well, right. So I think you're onto something. So here's the idea, and that is if I have something that really matters to me, a problem I want to solve, an opportunity I want to create, then almost anything becomes the raw material for thinking about it. So I wake up each day kind of overwhelmed with the idea that I can create a breakthrough and do something different. I show up at work on Mondays. Can you imagine that? Really energized to do something different. I'm going to improve customer service. I'm going to improve distribution. I have an idea for a new product or service. I am energized. If I don't have a purpose, I show up and I'm just kind of slogging it through. I'll do more of the same. And so I find purpose is the great energizer in a way. It's a great starting point for making a difference. I'm kind of super highly motivated to show people that you don't have to be an expert to create a breakthrough. I wake up every Monday super excited to get the word out to more people. But I think whatever we have as our purpose, if it drives us, then it really makes us really powerful in terms of our ability to take a fresh look, because we'll do whatever it takes to be remarkable at solving that purpose. So that then leads us to the second, which is curiosity. And that is, if I have a purpose, I ought to be curious about, is there a better way to do the things that matter most? So if you're thinking about your job, think about, what should I be curious about? And it might not be folks in my industry who are awesome at what I do, but it might be folks who are in something else, who do something else, another business, another walk of life, who would be a spark, a source of inspiration. So let me give you an example. A team of people came to me because they needed to improve customer service in their organization. And they said, well, where should we think about it? And I said, well, think about all the leading providers. Where have you gotten great customer service? And then I said, how about this? Let's go to Cirque du Soleil together. And I have no idea what goes on at a Cirque du Soleil performance. They've got a funny language. They're doing all kinds of things. They're cool costumes. But I know they're focused on, from start to finish, a remarkable customer experience. So we arrived an hour early and we simply paid attention to everything they do to engage customers and get people excited about this kind of different type of entertainment. And then we stayed an hour afterwards to see all the things they were doing afterwards to make it so that people would really be involved, tell other people, be repeat customers. So wherever you think folks are remarkable in any walk of life at doing what you do, commit to being curious about what they do, figuring out what they do, and seeing if you can apply it to your work.
And when I'm thinking about the biography of Leonardo da Vinci here, it's like that dude may have been the most curious human who ever lived. It was astounding in terms of it didn't need to be remotely relevant to, so it seemed, what he was directly working on, but he would just go deep into researching a random animal's functioning body part, like why it did it the way it did. And in so doing, I mean, well, I guess the proof is in the pudding. That was remarkably fruitful for him.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, he ended up being called a Renaissance person, right? So I guess we have a term for somebody clever, but imagine here's one example from his world that ended up having a current implication. So Igor Sikorsky in 1939 invents the helicopter, the first vertical lift craft, okay? As an 11-year-old boy in a market, he saw a toy called a Chinese top. For those of you kind of listening, but you can't see it, I'll kind of demonstrate here. It's a stick with a propeller on it. You rub it in your hands and it goes straight up in the air. As an 11-year-old, that sparked him to think about humans someday going straight up in the air. He goes to a library in Kiev, where he's from, or Kiev, and the librarian says, well, you know, there was this guy, Leonardo da Vinci, and he actually drew pictures of a helicopter-like thing. Never, ever created one, but he drew pictures of them. Did he come up with this on his own? No. On his balcony in Florence, he saw dragonflies. And dragonflies are actually the natural embodiment of a helicopter. They're like miniature helicopters. Sikorsky saw this, looked at dragonflies, and many, many years later created a helicopter that actually on the maiden voyage flew for 59 minutes. That's kind of awesome, actually. I mean, compare that to the Wright brothers, 8 feet above a beach for 100 yards, and they're the fathers of flight. Sikorsky goes up for 59 minutes, straight up in the air and flies around. But Da Vinci was an important part of that because, as you said, he was innately curious about everything around him. And so he imagined that dragonflies were something humans could do. And it took about 500 years for humans to actually do it. But no, so I just feel like I would love everyone listening to just get out there and pay attention. You know, when I wander around, and I'm in DC, but I'm in Chicago a lot and lots of other places, I see people walking around glued to their phones, you know, as though that's like really important. They got to send a text, or they got to take a call, or whatever, or they got to check their email. They've got to do all those things. Just put your phone in your pocket and wander around and pay attention. You'll be shocked at all the things you see and the connections you start to make just by being curious.
Okay. And how about respect?
Well, so let's for a moment, because in my mind, there's a little bit of an order about it. So let me insert one more and then we'll get to respect. And so that's humility. And it's a natural thing. So look, if I honestly realize I don't know everything, or that the stuff I know isn't appropriate for solving the problem I'm trying to solve, I ought to be humble. I ought to admit that I don't know, and that ought to energize me even more to figure it out. And so I like the idea of humility. So let me give you a great example there. It's a sad example that turns out to work out really well. So a fellow named Dixon Chibanda, and you can Google his TED Talk, is one of only 13, that's an actual number, of licensed psychiatrists in the country of Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is a country of 17 million people. And so if you do the math, and I was not like a rock star math student, but I can tell that's not enough psychiatrists to take care of an entire nation that might have some mental health challenges. One day, one of his patients can't get to him and she takes her own life. And he decides there has to be a better way. And so he decides in a country that's under-resourced with psychiatrists that he has to figure out who would be respected that people would listen to. And he determines that it's grandmothers, the most respected people in lots of societies. He trains thousands of grandmothers to be the front line of mental health defense and creates an organization called Friendship Bench, in which he places benches in communities throughout Zimbabwe and tells young people they can book a time to hang out and talk with a grandmother. And he teaches the grandmothers the fundamentals of talking with somebody who's facing depression.
I love that. I'm reminded of the Vince Vaughn movie Nona's, where the Italian grandmas who start a restaurant, but this is way cooler.
Well, yeah. And so imagine this, 5 years later, the suicide rate in Zimbabwe goes down over 90%. And it's based on the fact that people have someone they can turn to, and it's a grandmother, and nobody's going to do something really bad when a grandmother cares about you. And so kind of a brilliant idea, but that's the idea of humility. I'm trained as a psychiatrist. That's not solving my problem. I've got to get more people involved in mental health. So back to what you were asking about respect. I can learn something remarkable from any other person on the planet if I'm open to doing that and if I'm willing to connect with them. So imagine, I tell a story in the book about a homeless man, an unhoused person that I met by actually going to McDonald's to have my Egg McMuffin and coffee. And I met a man out there who was sitting on the curb who asked if I could buy him 2 apple pies. And I said at first, because I was trying to focus on health, I said, well, 2 apple pies is not really a balanced breakfast. And he said, well, I really like apple pies. And I said, you're an adult. Go for it. Though I did get him an orange juice because I figure we all need vitamin C. I began to see him regularly. I would go to McDonald's every week and buy him 2 apple pies and an orange juice. Never got him to eat protein, but I'm not sure there's a lot of protein at McDonald's. And so I befriended him. A person who on the face of it, most people would say, what would I learn from him? I learned a lot from him during our conversations. I would guess I learned at least as much from him as he ever learned from me. But I learned about he was a jazz musician. I learned about his love of jazz. I listened today to lots of the musicians he recommended to me. I learned about his life and his family and some of the ideas he had. And most importantly, I learned about resilience. Almost every company and organization talks about we need to be more resilient in a fast-changing world. Here was a person who lived on the street for 2 years. He had to figure out how to be resilient every single day. And the things that he knew were things that I incorporate in my life and my world. So whether somebody's in another culture around the world, whether somebody's of a different generation, whether somebody through a quirk not necessarily of their own has landed in a difficult place, we can learn something from everybody, but we have to wake up each day believing anyone I meet potentially could be valuable to me. And the idea of respect is that I don't know where the ideas that I'm going to need are going to come from, but I ought to cast a wide net and be open to those. So that's the idea of respect. The fifth thing I'd love people to think about is what I call future focus. And many of the people listening probably were either subject to or they loved reading about Jules Verne, Around the World in 80 Days, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Jules Verne was like the first science fiction writer, or one of the first. He wrote all of his books based on wandering up and down the streets of Paris and imagining things and going to the library and reading other books. We can imagine what the future is going to be like by just engaging with the world around us and paying attention to the clues it's giving me. Why is everybody riding a scooter? Why do some restaurants not even have service people? I just scan a QR code and then I order online and then my food appears. Lots of things going on. Why are driverless cars really popular? All kinds of, but I need to pay attention. I need to get up and pay attention. I need to think about what the clues are about the future that are actually leading me to the future. And then I need to figure out how to win by getting to the future before anybody else. If I'm in a job, I should think about that for my company. What's going on out there in the world that's going to impact us? And how do I bring that in and be valuable, suggesting ways we can respond? So that's the idea of future focus. And then the last thing is the simple idea that I talk about all the time. And that is, and it's not something that we all think is great, but we all should be paranoid. And what do I mean by that? The reality is we all should pay attention to what's gaining on us. Right now, we're all afraid that AI is gaining on us. It's going to take our job. It's going to make what we do irrelevant. I think we need to pay attention, and then we need to figure out what's our strategy. As a human, how can I be valuable in a world of AI? I can imagine, I can make connections, I can care, I can be curious. AI is only as good as my ability to be all those things, and I can show how I can connect the dots in ways that no machine ever could. But I have to always believe that somebody's following me, because that motivates me to have, as we're talking about it, this enlightened ignorance. It motivates me to say, each day I can learn something new that will make a difference, that's going to make me more valuable in the work I do, and I'm determined to do it.
You're right. The word paranoia doesn't have the greatest connotation in terms of positivity. And yet If we think of it as the antidote to complacency, I think that's super useful to just have a bit of, well, we had one guest saying, fun, fear, and focus is just a great mix for getting stuff done and having creative ideas and all that. So in a way, there's a bit of sort of an emotional, maybe biochemical component there. But also, I think it's possible that I've probably been guilty of it. It's like, hey, the thing I've been doing has been working pretty well. I'm just going to keep doing that on repeat for years. And it might be worthwhile to not be so comfortable and to proactively change things up instead of having to have them change thrust upon me from external forces at a timing and in a context that's not ideal.
Well, no, so I think you're right. And just think about it logically. And that is 5 years ago, the world was very different than it is today. 5 years from now, it's going to be even more different than it is. If we believe we can do exactly the same thing and know exactly the same stuff and be relevant 5 years from now, I think we're kidding ourselves. In fact, if we think that we can go to school and major in computer science and that the day after we leave school and get a job, we won't have to learn something new, we're probably kidding ourselves. So the reality is we need to constantly up our game, but I think that's part of the fun of life, actually, learning the right new things when I need them. I like to think about the idea that we should learn how to engage the world. These 6 things I talk about are the things we should be learning as kind of habits of our lives. And then we should learn how to kind of just in time learn. Say, what do I need to know in order to do what I need to do to get me or our company or organization moving forward? And then I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to be all in. And I'm going to cram like crazy to figure that out. And then I'm going to make some mistakes, but I'm going to refine what I know. And I'm just going to get better and better at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned AI. I'd love your hot take in terms of how can AI help and hinder our creativity?
Well, so I use AI a lot, but I don't write anything with AI. And I don't come up with my final answers for AI. And I don't even imagine using AI. I often use AI just to think about what's known about a certain topic. And I use that as a bit of a starting point in helping me to think differently. I use AI to collect information. If I were to go to the web, I do a lot of speaking around the world. And I often say to myself, I'd like to do some speaking in Chicago or Japan or whatever. Can you give me the names and contact information of folks who book speakers in these places? And AI can do that. I'm sure I'm using up way more energy than I have a right to, but AI can do that really, really quickly. If I had to search a lot of data sources to figure that out, that would be a monumental effort. So I collect information using AI, but I use my human ability to imagine and to connect dots after I've used AI. And so I think of wherever a job requires creativity and innovation, wherever it requires building strong relationships with other people, wherever it requires kind of connecting dots in different ways, seeing patterns in different ways. I think all of those things are things that humans are going to do really, really well. And so I'd invest in those things. And then I'd just invest in how to learn quickly.
Okay. Well, Alan, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about some of your favorite things.
I just believe for everybody listening, we've been sold, I don't want to say it's a bill of goods, but we've been convinced, a lot of us, that we're not particularly innovative, that the world is a place in which there are people who are really creative and then the rest of us, and we need to be resigned to just doing stuff. I believe we all have the potential to be remarkably creative. It's just we've got to open our eyes and pay attention and start thinking in different ways. I wrote this book to really challenge people to say, I can actually take a fresh look at the things that matter most and come up with something different. And so I want everybody out there to believe you can do awesome things. You just have to be open to trying to make those happen. And so that's really what I'm kind of passionate about, is the belief that every single person can do awesome things with kind of this straightforward formula for the 6 things we need to do really well.
Big thanks to Alan for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsored checkout is Monarch. I don't enjoy thinking about or fiddling with money, so I love resources that make this quicker and easier. Set yourself up for financial success this year. Monarch is a gorgeous personal finance tool that makes your money life easier. It brings your whole money picture from budgets to accounts and transactions and investments into one super handy dashboard on your phone or laptop. I was such a fan of the old mint.com and was super bummed when it disappeared. But the good news is that Monarch was founded by a team that includes the original product manager of Mint, and I dare say it's even better. I like the graphical summaries that help me drill down into things quickly and easily, and helps me get to the bottom of anything that just seems off or weird, or helps me zero in on great opportunities for savings faster. In fact, Monarch helped the average user save over $200 per month after joining. So set yourself up for financial success in 2026 with Monarch, the all-in-one tool that makes proactive money management simple all year long. Use code AWESOME at monarch.com for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarch.com with code AWESOME. One sponsor to check out is Scribe. When your team is trying to become more awesome at their job, unclear processes can create enormous friction. We all want to do great work, but poor documentation, lacking knowledge transfer, and mixed messages mean teams are totally in the dark on how things actually get done. Scribe is a workflow AI platform that captures any workflow in real time and turns it into step-by-step documentation automatically. That's right, you don't have to do anything. No manual writing, no screen sharing videos, nothing. So cool. Scribe is trusted by over 80,000 enterprises, including nearly half of the Fortune 500. I've spent literally hours pulling together checklists and screen shares to communicate processes, but with Scribe, I just turn on the extension and it captures every click, step, and screenshot automatically to build a complete guide as I go. It also automatically redacts sensitive information, provides real-time step-by-step guidance inside the actual tool, and even suggests ways to improve the workflow itself. Building an awesome team starts with making sure everyone knows how to do the work, and Scribe makes that effortless. Book a personalized enterprise demo by visiting scribe.how/awesome. That's scribe.how/awesome. One sponsored checkout is Narwhal. I am so impressed with the Narwhal Flow 2 vacuum and mopping robot. I have tried 3 other robots in the past, and this is far and away my favorite. It just gets the job done without me having to babysit it. It's quieter, smarter, prettier, easier, and higher performing than any other floor cleaning robot I've used. Their Flow Wash mopping system has 16 nozzles spraying fresh water continuously. They've also got a wastewater extraction and storage system to prevent residue and odors. It adapts to wet and dry messes with their Narmind Pro autonomous system. It gets back to its all-in-one base station without any trouble or requiring any help or intervention from me. It never just stops working in the middle of the floor or gets all tangled up in a cord. It's everything I've always wanted from a cleaning robot, but have not had until now with Narwhal. So if you want to treat your home to spotless, fresh floors, visit us.narwhal.com/Pete. That's us.narwhal.com/Pete. All right. Thank you. Well, now could you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
So I love Jose Andres, the restaurateur who also created World Central Kitchen and who's determined, especially in war zones and danger zones, to feed people. So he once said, life begins at the edge of the unknown. And so I believe the stuff we already know is fine. The stuff we don't know but could know is like energizing and awesome. So I love that quote.
And a favorite book?
I like Don Quixote by Cervantes. I love the idea that we all need to kind of battle windmills and think about what's possible and imagine no matter where we start that we can do remarkable things.
And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
If I were to give a favorite tool that I like in the world of work that's relevant to your audience, I would say each day find somebody in your organization you don't know very well, but that you working with them would be beneficial to the organization, and set up either a call or a meeting or coffee, depending if you're co-located in the same place, and have a conversation in which you just talk about things you have in common that have nothing to do with work. And I can guarantee you in 10 minutes, you'll make a connection with that person and you'll be more eager to think creatively and make a difference with that person.
Okay. And a favorite habit?
I wake up each day and we have 3 dogs. I take them for a walk and I pay attention to kind of what interests them, probably the smell of another dog being in some place. But because they take their time walking, it's kind of called a sniff and stroll. It gives me time to ponder and think about things. And so I'm imagining all the things I see and kind of the power of the bright color of flowers this time of year, of kind of the different ways people transport themselves around. I just pay attention, and my morning walk is a great start.
Okay. And is there a key nugget you share that seems to really connect with folks? They quote it back to you often?
There are a lot of key things, but I'd love to think about the thing that people kind of resonate with most is just the reality that we can figure out the stuff that matters most if we have the right mindset, that we don't have to know everything, that we should just get started, figure out something that matters to you. And even if you're bad at it, just get started, because you'll bump into ideas along the way and figure out how to be remarkable.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch with you, where would you point them?
Well, so lots of places. I mean, they can go to alangregerman.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Don't follow me. Connect with me. I'd like to learn what you're up to. So you can do that. As Pete said, you can go on Listen Notes and put my name in there and kind of listen to me. I mean, I'm honored to be on your show. But if you want to hear more stuff, if you'd like more information, I can send you other stuff about me, articles or books. Read a few of my books. I mean, read The Wisdom of Ignorance. And if you don't like it, I will Venmo you the money.
Guarantee. And you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
I think just show up at work each day and say to yourself, how can we be more valuable to the internal or external customers we serve? So how can we make an even greater difference in their lives? And I think if you use that as the starting point of your purpose, given whatever job you have now, it's going to energize you to take a fresh look at the things you do. You won't get stuck in the things you do. And over time, you'll find you're more and more valuable to wherever you work.
All right. Alan, thank you.
Thank you. I've appreciated the chance to be on your show. Thanks.
I really love what Alan has to say about being curious about other areas completely outside your normal world, because in so doing, all kinds of little things can pop up. And one thing I like to do as a thought exercise is to make a little bit of a metaphor, to say this new thing I'm learning about, whatever it is, chess, making mole sauce, is analogous or metaphorical to something else I'm working on. And I think, what would this element of the metaphor be? And what would that element be? And so doing little new ideas, potential for connections, spring to light. And it's just a lot of fun. It's kind of silly, kind of fun, keeps the brain flexible. Good stuff from Alan. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, I recommend you drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1151. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.